Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome all of you back to another Rage video where today, ladies and gentlemen, it is National Anthem reaction time once again, ladies and gentlemen, and today we introduce all of you to Het Wilhemus, the National Anthem of Holland, otherwise known as the Netherlands, otherwise known as Dutch. I was going to say Dutchland there for example. No, that's German, that isn't it? So yes, another European national anthem is going to be ours very, very shortly. That didn't sound quite right, that. Yeah, so after this, actually, it'd be interesting to see, like, I think it's like Lithuania, I think it's like either Albania, and there's only like a certain number of European countries left that we've got to take a look at, which is only this sort of like a very slight problem we have while doing this, is because they can't just keep inventing national. There are alternate versions to national anthems, yes, but you know they can't just have all of them. You know what I mean? There's at some point. I mean, where else do we go? I mean, of course, I think like Suriname definitely has some, but then of course does like I don't know Saint Helena have one or something like that, or Madagascar probably will, but exactly how far do we go? I mean, it's all becoming a little bit of an interesting dilemma as we go through the weeks. Now, some things about Holland that you may not know. First is that tulips are actually not native to Holland. They just took all the credit for them. Yes, absolutely true. Holland is also the tallest race in all of Europe, which actually isn't particularly very special when you consider the fact that Holland is actually... I don't know if it's either the flattest or it's among the flattest countries in Europe. So basically, anytime there's ever a strong storm and all that, you gotta. It's only a good thing that the Dutch are so tall and all that, because they literally would have been 6 feet underwater by now. So you know it's not your property, love. You got to give it back. Among other things as well, the famous red light district in Amsterdam. I've heard of that somewhere, and among other things, they actually were they were the race that invented CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray DVDs, which is kind of like normal DVDs but even more redundant. Thank you, Holland. Also, among just many other things as well, there are over 2,000 windmills in the whole of Holland, which means that there's at least one windmill per 16 people. Because Holland, it's something like about that, because Holland has actually it's perhaps the single most densely populated country in all of Europe, but also 1/5 of all people born or live in Holland as we speak are actually of foreign descent, which possibly might make it next in line to the likes of either Spain or France or possibly even Poland or maybe even Germany in terms of people from foreign origin being born in Holland or live their lives in Holland. It's actually a pretty interesting idea. In fact, to be honest, there are so many other things outside of, the fact that they have an official language of their own, and it would certainly be of interest to know exactly how to speak it. And, well, to be fair, if there's anybody from Holland watching this right now, you may be interested to learn that on one of my secondary channels, Raging Reality International, I do translations in their native languages to all national anthems we go through. So we've gone through things like French, Spanish, German, Portuguese, Korean, Arabic, Hindustani. We have gone through so many languages in such a short space of time that actually, I wonder. That's another very interesting case to bring up, is that because we go through so many languages, and so many languages will be applicable to other types of anthem as well. It'll be interesting to see whether or not. I've never actually been quizzed by anybody about the use of language so far, or if anyone's ever thought about like talking about my very unique sense of humor. Well, humor is pushing it, but also about just what exactly would like living in Holland be like, as opposed to just somebody who was just visiting across, because it is sort of a dying ambition to actually see and explore a lot of the world. And Holland strikes me as like, I always associate, well, some people would associate Holland with tulips, windmills, Ajax, the North Sea, the North Shore Canal. But then, of course, you got to understand about things like, well, what about national character? I mean, what are the Dutch really like? And that's something I don't really have a good answer for or have a clear idea about where to begin with that. I got into enough trouble with that the last time. So, with all that being said and done, this is gonna be interesting. I'm actually should just get straight into it. So, please rise, ladies and gentlemen, for the national anthem of Holland. Oh, the William. That makes sense. Another really outstanding one, ladies and gentlemen. One that speaks so heavily about love, loyalty, and that we are imprisoned in a society, a world that perhaps would prefer us to be remained in captivity, as though we are a people that were designed to be watched and never heard of. So I had an interesting idea about this, and usually I wouldn't. Okay, so here's from there is some, because there are some clues actually I do understand about like certain things. So I'm going to take an inspiration that this was written probably during the mid 16th century, because they talk about the king of Spain, and one of the things I certainly do remember is that it would have to take place after the end of the reign of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. But then again, Charles V was sort of more 1520s, and this would probably have to take place a little bit longer after that, like 40 odd years. So we could say something between either 1560 or the 1600s. So I don't necessarily know whether or not just Holland went under a different name when they were occupied by the Spanish. But well, it would have to be during this period, but obviously it would have to. And maybe I should I look into it? I think I should look into this a little bit more, because I know, of course, if you've ever studied medieval history, and certainly particularly between the periods of Charlemagne and towards the ends of the English Civil War, is sort of more, that's roundabout more my territory in terms of history. So we're talking the span of roughly 700 years we're sort of talking about. So, okay, we'll go slate back into this. The William is the national anthem of both the Netherlands and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. It dates back to at least 1572, making it the oldest national anthem in use. Oh, well, that's actually very unique. It's the oldest national anthem that that is still used. That's really interesting, because I would have almost initially thought that God Save the King / Queen would have been. Though again, actually, I say that, but again, God Save the King and Queen was probably maybe when the title of King and Queen was made into a constitutionary monarch, that they were only more figureheads as opposed to heads of, well, technically, because, okay, I'll get to this in a second, but I've got to correct myself. It would be disastrous if I didn't. Okay, so as far as I understand, King Charles III is the head of the church and head of state, but there are hefty power limitations. That's basically just that. That's that cleared up. Okay, so dates back to 1572. So I was only about 12 years out initially. Provided that the latter is defined as consisting of both a melody and lyrics. Although Wilhemus was not recognized as the official national anthem until 1932, so basically 91 more years, ladies and gentlemen, and that will be its 100th anniversary. It's interesting. I like that. It has always been popular with parts of the Dutch population and resurfaced on several occasions in the course of Dutch history before gaining its present status. It was also the anthem of the Netherlands Antilles from 1954 to 1964. Now, Wilhemus originated in the Dutch Revolt, the nation's struggle to achieve independence from the Spanish Empire. It tells of the father of the nation, Willem of Orange. Orange, would it be pronounced slightly different if it's sort of slightly more inland Europe? I'll just say Orange, just for the sake of brevity. Who was standholder in the Netherlands under the King of Spain. I wonder if does it give any example? Philip II was the King of Spain during this time. In the first person, as if quoting himself, William speaks to the Dutch before both the revolt and his own personal struggle, to be faithful to the king, without being unfaithful to his conscience, to serve God and the Dutch. In the lyrics, Williams composes himself with the biblical David, who's, well, I must say as well, one thing that's always very interesting and something that's a little bit more easier to understand from a lot of European national, well, even during this period of history as well, from the 16th century, when you're talking about the Renaissance, we're talking more about the Renaissance period. So there was a lot of discussions about what power limitations does science hold now in the world, when anybody could look ahead. And again, this is when they introduced hefty punishments to those who defied not only the king and God, but also who solely served to things like the advancement of science and technology, even during this period of history. And bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, you think if it goes as far as that, this is when things like witch trials were still very much popular, and they would remain popular until the middle of the 17th century. At least, again, because it goes on for at least 100 years, so which it might be 50 or 100, but you can understand is that whether you want to say this is people simply not knowing how to face facts, or simply taking this as the initiative as saying is that this is the only way religion can remain powerful by means of bloodshed, and to dispel prophecies or ideology spread by Martin Luther, I'll leave that up to your imagination. But I'm also willing to imagine that this was far from just a thing in England. This could have been all across Europe, especially when we remember, specifically when we're talking about Holland, it was still under the control of I don't necessarily know if Philip II could be claimed as Holy Roman Emperor or just Emperor of the Spanish. Mind you, again, actually, to be honest, I just saw like a quick portrait of him, and actually, I know that the Spanish monarchies had something of a very notorious line with incest. Charles V, for example, had a chin that was at least 2 feet long, and there were a lot of things spread by Henry VIII. I'm getting so off topic, but you'll be very surprised how often it is when we're going as far back as this that we can actually discuss more about medieval history. It's the sort of thing I haven't really had to do since I was at least 13 years old. Okay, so in the lyric, so he compares himself to David and serves under the tyrannical King Saul. As the merciful David defeats the unjust Saul and is rewarded by God with the kingdom of Israel, so too William hopes to be rewarded as kingdom, with a kingdom. Both Wilhemus and the Dutch Revolt should be seen in the light of 16th century Reformation in Europe and the resulting persecution of Protestants by the Spanish Inquisition in the Lower Countries. Militant music proved very useful not only in lampooning Roman clerks and repressive monarchs, but also in gathering class-transcending social cohesion, in successfully combining a psalmic character with political relevancy. Wilhelm stands as the preeminent example of the genre. I think it is true, ladies and gentlemen. It's, again, when you're talking about like this period of history, and as best orchestrated through lines like this, through an explanation like this about revolutions, revolts, civil wars, and bear in mind, again, we're talking roughly 200 years before things like Napoleon would completely dismember the Roman Empire as we know it. There's so much about this period. This is the sort of thing you could eyeball a little bit about exactly where the world was going. It wasn't going in the direction that religion was going to remain a dominancy in Europe forever. It was going to stand as a part of history where actually this is the point. This is the point where people really began to believe that actually it's not about serving a god or a government or a king. It's about service to each other, and automatically things would have to be put in place to make sure that the needs of the population were met. And I never necessarily thought about expressing this so much in the Williams, because it was one of the last places I would have suspected. And again, that probably might just have to come from the fact that it comes nearly 200 or so years before even the French Revolution, in which, again, La Marseillaise could be just the tip of the iceberg. La Marseillaise is many consider to be the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Reformation, the consorts of things like Europe, and a sort of a gateway into how the working class and how the caste system of society, probably maybe a little bit more than just Europe, but the world over, is sort of adapted, and how even it goes even further than that, and how it was sort of things like this is where we got to where we are. That's a very encouraging idea, and I'm actually glad that I sort of took a bit more time to like discuss and consider it, because there's a lot to it, and I like it for that. So anyway, I hope all of you guys have enjoyed this reaction video to the Williams, the national anthem of Holland. Please make sure to leave all your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below and what you guys felt of the Williams for yourselves, and I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. take care, and Ajax.